I would love to have met her, and she's obviously she's an inspirational woman to look up to.
It's incredible how strong and how you've been able to cope, really. And I put that down.
A heavy oak door slams shut inside Windsor Castle. Silence falls over the room. Earl Charles Spencer stands face to face with Queen Camilla. In his hand sits an antique leather portfolio containing private documents that were never meant to see light. Within seconds, sharp words echo across the drawing room. Decades of buried secrets tear through royal protocol. Then, the unexpected happens. Catherine, Princess of Wales, completely breaks down into tears. Prince William steps forward to shield his wife as King Charles faces a horrifying family ultimatum. What secret did Diana's brother bring into the palace? Why did his words cut Catherine so deeply? And will these hidden disclosures destroy the monarchy from within? The uninvited guest and the silent war. It all started with Earl Charles Spencer. One day he walks into the room without an invitation. In his right hand, he holds a worn leather portfolio. The atmosphere turns ice cold instantly, and the chatter stops dead. Senior royals turn around in complete shock. The gathering was supposed to be completely private. No cameras were allowed. No press secretaries stood near the doors. No official royal photographers lingered in the hallways. It was meant to be an informal afternoon for the inner circle of the royal family. King Charles and Queen Camilla sat near the window. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, shared a couch nearby. The mood had been surprisingly calm just moments earlier. Then the doors opened without a warning. Earl Charles Spencer did not wait to be announced. He did not bow or offer the customary formal greetings required by court tradition. He simply walked straight into the center of the drawing room. His posture was stiff. His expression was completely unreadable. The silence that followed was suffocating. King Charles froze with his teacup halfway to his lips. Queen Camilla narrowed her eyes immediately. Prince William sat up straight, his face tightening with instant caution. Catherine looked between the men, sensing the immediate shift in oxygen. Why was Diana's brother standing inside a private royal sanctuary? Charles Spencer does not make surprise visits to royal residences. He has maintained a distant, highly guarded relationship with the palace establishment for nearly 3 decades. Ever since his famous speech at Westminster Abbey in 1997, Spencer has been seen as a fierce keeper of his sister's memory. He talked about Diana in every interview. He lives away from the daily operations of the royal household. He guards the Althorpe estate and writes histories. He protects the Spencer family legacy. His sudden physical presence inside Windsor Castle signaled one thing only. A crisis was underway. Underneath the arm of Earl Spencer sat a thick, vintage leather portfolio. It was battered around the edges. The brass latch was tarnished from age. It looked like an artifact pulled directly from a private archive or a locked safe. Everyone in the room fixated on that portfolio immediately. What could possibly be inside those leather covers? What dark details required a direct, personal delivery to the ruling monarch? For months, subtle tensions had been rising behind the palace walls. The public saw unity. They saw regal smiles, pristine wardrobe choices, and synchronized appearances on castle balconies. But behind those closed oak doors, a quiet struggle had been taking place. Historical narratives were shifting. Titles were being adjusted. Royal archives were being reorganized. For the Spencer family, certain recent changes felt less like administrative housekeeping and more like an effort to diminish Princess Diana's historical standing. Charles Spencer had remained quiet in public for a long time, but quietness must never be mistaken for compliance. Spencer took 3 deliberate steps forward. He stopped just feet away from Queen Camilla. King Charles finally lowered his cup to the saucer with a sharp click. He asked his former brother-in-law what he thought he was doing. Spencer did not turn his head toward the king. His eyes remained locked directly on Camilla. The silence stretched for 3 agonizing seconds. William started to stand up from his seat. Catherine placed a gentle hand on her husband's forearm, silently telling him to wait. She could see the emotion trembling beneath Spencer's rigid composure. She knew Charles Spencer was not here to make small talk. "We need to discuss what is being erased," Spencer said. His voice was low, flat, and absolute. With those 7 words, the unwritten agreement that had maintained peace for decades evaporated. The silent war between old memories and new royal realities was about to break out into the open. and the contents of the leather portfolio were about to be revealed to everyone in the room. The shadow of the late princess. An antique leather portfolio rests upon the polished mahogany table. Its tarnished brass clasp glints beneath the crystal chandelier. Inside lie private documents, forgotten notes, and written words never meant to see the public eye. Earl Charles Spencer places his right hand flat against the cracked leather cover. He does not sit down. He stands tall, looking straight into the eyes of Queen Camilla. The air in the room grows heavy. Decades of carefully guarded silence are about to break open. The mahogany table sat in the exact center of the drawing room. For generations, it had held teacups, state papers, and quiet family discussions. Now, it held something far more dangerous. The vintage leather portfolio looked out of place against the pristine, polished wood. It carried the scent of old paper, dust, and long-buried memories. Every eye in the room moved from Charles Spencer's face to the leather case. King Charles looked at the object with an expression of deep, underlying dread. Queen Camilla stared at it with cold, guarded detachment. Prince William stood rigid near his wife. Catherine watched the interaction, her breath catching softly in her chest. Charles Spencer took a slow, deliberate breath. He began to speak, his voice calm, yet razor-sharp. He reminded everyone in the room of a vow made decades ago. In September of 1997, standing inside Westminster Abbey before a grieving world, he had made a solemn promise. He had pledged that Diana's blood family would always protect her memory. He had promised that her unique soul would never be sanitized or rewritten by institutional power. For nearly 30 years, Spencer had kept that battle at a distance. He had preserved Althorpe Estate as a sanctuary for his sister's memory. He had turned down countless interviews and refused to profit from personal grief. He had allowed the royal family to find its own balance in the wake of tragedy. He had quietly watched as time moved forward, but watching in silence did not mean forgetting. In recent months, a subtle shift had begun to take place within the monarchy. The transition to a new reign brought sweeping administrative changes. Historical records were being reorganized in official archives. Display descriptions and royal exhibitions were being quietly updated. Public relations strategies were reframing the narrative of the past 4 decades. To the casual observer, these updates seemed like standard palace operations. But to Charles Spencer, they represented something far more calculated. It appeared to him as a methodical attempt to alter the historical record. The goal seemed clear: to smooth over uncomfortable truths and elevate Queen Camilla's standing at the expense of Princess Diana's historical place. Spencer raised his voice slightly, ensuring every word landed with impact. He addressed Queen Camilla directly. He stated that taking a crown did not grant the right to alter history. Spencer pointed out that honor cannot be built by erasing the memory of the woman who came before. Queen Camilla did not flinch, but her posture stiffened. She reminded Spencer that the monarchy operates in the present, not in the past. She argued that the institution must move forward to survive. She maintained that updates to official histories were simply part of normal administrative continuity. Her voice was firm, cool, and practiced. That cool response only heightened the tension in the room. Spencer tapped his fingers against the leather surface of the portfolio. He told her that true history does not belong to palace publicists or image consultants. History belongs to those who lived it and those who suffered through it. He explained that the portfolio on the table did not contain palace press releases or media speculation. It contained primary evidence. Inside were handwritten letters, private journal entries, and confidential correspondence from the late 1980s and early 1990s. These were original documents written by Princess Diana herself during her most isolated moments inside the palace. They were documents that had never been published, and pages that had never been seen by official biographers or legal teams. They contained Diana's direct observations regarding the emotional warfare that tore her marriage apart. They detailed specific names, exact dates, and private conversations that revealed the full extent of the psychological toll she endured. For years, Spencer had kept these documents locked away in a private safe at Althorpe. He had sworn only to use them if someone attempted to rewrite his sister's story. That moment, he declared, had now arrived. The weight of his words settled over the drawing room like a thick blanket. King Charles leaned forward, his voice tight as he asked what Spencer intended to do with the materials. Spencer looked away from Camilla for the first time and locked eyes with the king. He made it abundantly clear he was not there to ask for permission. He was there to set a boundary that could never be crossed. Catherine listened to every word, her face growing paler by the second. She could feel the crushing emotional weight of the past invading the present room. The shadow of the late princess had filled the space entirely, and the true contents of that leather portfolio were about to trigger a reaction no one saw coming. The explosive face-off in the drawing room, voices rise above royal decorum as direct accusations cross the room. Decades of calculated silences vanish in an instant. Earl Charles Spencer steps even closer to Queen Camilla. The air in the drawing room burns with friction. Years of unspoken resentment are stripped away. What happens when the unspoken truth meets royal authority head-on? The silence in the drawing room broke into sharp pieces. Earl Spencer did not raise his voice to a scream. He did not need to. The quiet intensity of his tone carried more authority than a roar. He stared directly at Queen Camilla. He pointed toward the worn leather portfolio lying between them. He told her that history cannot be sanitized. He accused the palace communications team of executing a quiet campaign. It was a campaign designed to polish one image while dimming another. For years, court commentators claimed the past was settled. The public had supposedly moved on. The crown had stabilized. But inside that room, the unresolved ghost of the late 1990s filled every corner. Queen Camilla stood her ground. Her shoulders straightened and her eyes turned cold as glass. She told Spencer that his anger belonged to a different era. She reminded him that the crown must look to the future. The survival of the institution depended on stability, unity, and continuity. She argued that no one was erasing anyone. She stated that administrative updates to historical archives were standard protocol for a new reign. Spencer let out a harsh, bitter laugh. He asked her if she truly believed her own public relations team. He listed specific actions that had taken place over the past 18 months. He brought up subtle modifications made to public exhibition plaques. He cited the quiet removal of Diana's name from certain charitable foundations. He mentioned how official historical timelines had been rewritten to minimize key events. "You think small edits go unnoticed," Spencer said. "You think if you change a caption here and remove a photo there, the world will forget. But my family remembers. The public remembers." King Charles tried to step between them. He raised a hand in a gesture of peace. He called Spencer by his first name. He asked for calm and restraint. He insisted that Windsor Castle was not the place for personal rivalries. Spencer turned his gaze to the king for a brief second. He told Charles that this was not a personal rivalry. It was a matter of historic integrity. He asserted that a nation's history belongs to the people, not to palace advisors trying to craft a smooth narrative. Then, Spencer turned his attention toward Queen Camilla once again. He asked her how it felt to wear a crown that carried so many heavy shadows. The question hit the room like a physical blow. The atmosphere became razor sharp. Queen Camilla's jaw tightened. She told Spencer that he was crossing a dangerous line. She warned him that attacking the queen consort was an attack on the monarchy itself. Spencer did not back down. He leaned across the mahogany table. He told her that title and power could not rewrite truth. He stated that respect must be earned through honesty, not created through public relations strategies. At that moment, Spencer turned his body away from Camilla. He looked directly across the room at Prince William. The shift was sudden and dramatic. Prince William had remained standing near Catherine. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. He was caught between his loyalty to his father's reign and the living memory of his mother. Spencer addressed his nephew directly. His voice softened slightly, but the words carried a devastating weight. He delivered a chilling warning. He told William to look closely at what was happening around him. He warned the young prince that the palace machinery never changes its nature. It only changes its operators. "Do not allow them to do to your wife what they did to your mother," Spencer said quietly. The sentence echoed through the drawing room like thunder. It was a direct, unfiltered shot at the heart of the royal establishment. Spencer warned William that institutional power always demands a sacrifice. He cautioned him that when public perception shifts, the system will protect itself first, no matter who gets broken in the process. Prince William stood frozen, his jaw clenched tightly. The warning hit him at his most vulnerable point. For years, William had worked tirelessly to protect Catherine from the intense pressures of palace life. Hearing his uncle draw a direct line between Diana's tragic past and Catherine's present reality shook him to his core. Catherine sat on the couch, listening to every single word. The psychological weight of Spencer's warning hung heavily in the air. The boundary between past trauma and present reality had completely collapsed. Catherine's breaking point. For a woman known for unbreakable composure, the sudden breakdown came without warning. Catherine sat motionless on the silk sofa, her breath hitched in her throat. The room went silent. Then the tears began to fall. They were silent tears at first, streaming down her pale cheeks. It was an unprecedented moment inside royal walls. The Princess of Wales was weeping openly in front of the most senior members of the British monarchy. For over 15 years, Catherine had been the rock of the modern royal family. She had mastered the art of public composure. She had survived media storms, intense public scrutiny, and personal health struggles with quiet dignity. She was the steady hand, the soothing presence, and the flawless future queen. She had never shown weakness in front of court officials. Also, she had never lost her temper in front of the staff. She certainly had never cried in front of King Charles and Queen Camilla. But Earl Spencer's words had cut through her carefully built defenses like a razor. Do not allow them to do to your wife what they did to your mother. The phrase hung in the air like a heavy fog. It was not just a warning to William, it was a dark reminder of what Catherine herself had endured behind closed doors. For months, Catherine had been carrying an unbearable weight. She had faced complex health challenges and endured relentless online speculation and media conspiracies. She had tried to balance her recovery with her responsibilities as a mother of 3 young children. Through it all, she had carried the overwhelming burden of shielding the monarchy's future image. Hearing Charles Spencer connect her personal struggles directly to Princess Diana's lonely isolation broke something inside her. A single sob escaped her lips. It was small, sharp, and full of raw pain. Prince William turned toward his wife instantly. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by sheer panic and fierce protectiveness. He dropped to one knee in front of Catherine and took both of her hands in his. He spoke to her in hushed, urgent tones, telling her to breathe. Catherine covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook uncontrollably. The tears flowed freely now, smudging her delicate makeup and falling onto her lapel. The sight of Catherine breaking down shocked the entire room. King Charles took a step back, his face turning pale. He looked at his daughter-in-law with genuine anguish. Charles loved Catherine deeply. He saw her as the bright light of the family's future. Seeing her overwhelmed by the toxic remnants of his own past marriage filled him with sudden guilt. Queen Camilla stood rigid, but her expression shifted slightly. The cold detachment in her eyes cracked for a brief moment. She realized that the confrontation was no longer just about archives, plaques, or historical narratives. It had become a deeply personal human tragedy, playing out on the drawing room floor. Earl Spencer stood motionless beside the mahogany table. He had not intended to hurt Catherine. He respected her. He saw how hard she worked to keep her family grounded, but his warning had landed with devastating accuracy because it pointed to a truth everyone in that room knew was real. "I cannot do this anymore," Catherine whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. She looked up at William through tear-stained eyes. She was not talking about her public duties or the silent pressure. The expectation to absorb endless attacks while maintaining a perfect smile. The demand to smile for photos while internal wars raged around her. The fear that no matter how much she gave, the palace machinery would always ask for more. William pulled Catherine into a tight embrace. He rested his chin on her head, wrapping his arms around her tightly. Then, William raised his head and looked directly at his father and Queen Camilla. His eyes were burning with rage. The rift in the room was no longer between Charles Spencer and the crown. The rift had split the immediate royal family wide open. William made it crystal clear where his priorities lay. His duty was not to institutional public relations. His duty was to his wife. "This ends today," William declared, his voice trembling with controlled anger. He stared at his father with absolute authority. He warned that if Catherine was pushed past her limits to protect institutional images, he would take drastic action. He He made it clear that he would not sacrifice his wife's health or sanity on the altar of royal duty. The tension inside the drawing room had reached an absolute boiling point. The shadow of Princess Diana had not just touched the past, it had fundamentally altered the future of Prince William's reign. The walkout and the ultimatum. A chair scrapes sharply against the marble floor. Footsteps echo down the grand gallery. Prince William takes his wife's hand and turns his back on King Charles and Queen Camilla. The ultimate boundary has been crossed. For the first time in modern royal history, the heir to the throne walks out on an active confrontation, leaving behind a chilling ultimatum that threatens the very stability of the crown. Prince William did not ask for permission to leave. He did not offer a formal bow to the king. He gently helped Catherine up from the silk couch. He wrapped his arm tightly around her waist, supporting her trembling frame. Catherine wiped her eyes with a lace handkerchief, keeping her gaze fixed firmly on the floor. She could not look at Queen Camilla. She could not look at King Charles. The atmosphere was completely poisoned. William guided Catherine toward the massive double doors of the drawing room. King Charles took 2 quick steps forward, his hand outstretched in panic. He called out to his son, pleading with him to stop and listen. He urged William not to walk away in anger. He reminded him that the palace staff outside those doors would sense the tension immediately. William stopped in his tracks near the heavy oak threshold. He did not turn around completely, but he looked back over his shoulder. His jaw was set like marble. His voice was cold, sharp, and stripped of all royal diplomacy. He told his father that the conversation was over. He stated that his priority was protecting Catherine and their children. He declared that if the palace advisors continued to push historical revisions that caused distress to his family, he would step back entirely from high-profile engagements. It was a devastating threat. A royal walkout of that magnitude would dismantle the monarchy's public image overnight. Without William and Catherine at the forefront, the public relations strategy of the new reign would collapse. "Fix this," William said, staring directly at King Charles. "Or I will." With those final words, William opened the door. He walked out of the suite with Catherine, leaving the door wide open behind them. The echo of their footsteps faded down the long gallery corridor, leaving a crushing silence in their wake. Inside the drawing room, only 3 people remained: King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Earl Charles Spencer. The dynamic had completely shifted. The emotional collapse of Catherine and the sudden departure of the Prince of Wales had stripped away any lingering pretenses of royal authority. Queen Camilla stood near the window, her hands clasped tightly together. Her face was unusually pale. She turned to Spencer, her voice trembling slightly with anger. She asked him if he was satisfied with the devastation he had caused. She accused him of coming into the palace solely to ignite a family war. Spencer stood tall beside the mahogany table. He placed his hand flat on the vintage leather portfolio. He looked at Camilla without a single trace of regret. He told her that he did not bring the devastation. He merely brought the mirror. He asserted that the real damage had been done long ago by decades of palace maneuvering, media leaks, and historical manipulation. King Charles walked slowly over to the table. He looked old and exhausted. The weight of his past decisions, his former marriage, and his current responsibilities seemed to press down on his shoulders all at once. He asked Spencer what he wanted to happen next. Earl Spencer delivered his ultimatum. It was clear, precise, and non-negotiable. He demanded an immediate and permanent halt to all archival revisions concerning Princess Diana. He required that all historical exhibition descriptions remain accurate, unaltered, and respectful to her legacy. Furthermore, he demanded an explicit guarantee that no private documents or official records belonging to Diana would ever be reclassified or suppressed by the Crown. If those demands were met, Spencer promised that the private leather portfolio would remain closed. The unpublished letters, personal notes, and confidential diaries would stay locked inside his safe at Althorpe Estate. However, if the palace continued to rewrite history or diminish Diana's place in the monarchy, Spencer issued a grim warning. He stated that he would publish every single document in full. He would release the primary evidence to academic archives and international publisher platforms across the globe. "You hold the power to choose," Spencer said softly. "You can respect the truth, or you can let the world read it." Without waiting for an immediate answer, Earl Spencer picked up the leather portfolio from the table. He rested it securely under his arm. He gave a single formal nod toward King Charles, completely ignoring Queen Camilla. He turned around and walked out of the drawing room, leaving the king and queen alone in the heavy quiet of Windsor Castle. The ultimatum was set. The future of the monarchy was hanging by a single thread. The fallout and the unspoken promise emergency briefings echo through palace hallways as the sun sets over Windsor Castle. King Charles faces an impossible choice between institutional survival and family unity. The silence that follows a crisis is always louder than the argument itself. A single evening changed the balance of power inside the British monarchy forever. The unspoken promise between a father, a son, and a late mother now hangs over the crown. The heavy doors of Windsor Castle closed behind Earl Charles Spencer. Inside the private suite, the silence was suffocating. King Charles sat down slowly in a velvet armchair. He stared at the blank surface of the mahogany table, where the vintage portfolio had rested just moments earlier. Queen Camilla remained standing near the window. She watched the private dark sedan drive away down the long gravel driveway. The atmosphere inside the palace was thick with shock. A permanent line had been drawn across the royal family. It was a line that could never be erased. Within hours, senior communications advisors were summoned to an emergency briefing. There were no official press releases drafted for the morning newspapers, and there were no carefully worded updates prepared for court reporters. The instructions given to the palace staff were unusually brief and strict. No one was permitted to speak about the afternoon meeting. The entire event was placed under the highest level of internal security. But behind the closed doors of the executive offices, panic was spreading rapidly. The palace advisors recognized the catastrophic nature of the situation. Earl Spencer had not delivered an empty threat. The private archives preserved at Althorpe Estate contained primary evidence that could dismantle decades of carefully constructed public relations strategies. More importantly, Prince William had taken a stand that shattered traditional royal protocol. For the first time in modern history, the heir to the throne had openly aligned himself with his mother's family against the current administration of the crown. The strategic reality hit the king with crushing weight. If William stood down from public duties, the public image of the monarchy would crumble within weeks. The palace machinery had relied on William and Catherine to represent the modern face of royalty. Losing their support was a price the institution simply could not afford to pay. Across the palace grounds at Adelaide Cottage, Prince William stayed close to Catherine. The Princess of Wales had slowly regained her composure, but the profound emotional fatigue was visible on her face. William made a solemn, private vow to his wife that evening. He assured her that her health, her peace of mind, and her dignity would always come before institutional demands. He made it clear that he would no longer allow historical battles or public relations maneuvers to invade their personal sanctuary. William reminded Catherine that her well-being was essential to their family and to the future reign. He pledged to act as an unyielding shield against any internal pressure from palace advisors. He told her that no crown was worth the sacrifice of her peace. By the following morning, subtle changes began to occur behind closed doors. Urgent orders were quietly issued to palace archivists and gallery curators. Planned modifications to historical displays regarding Princess Diana were immediately suspended. Text updates for upcoming palace tours were placed on permanent hold. Reclassifications of archived letters were canceled. The quiet strategy to reframe the historical record was completely abandoned before the public ever realized it was underway. King Charles had made his decision. He chose to honor the boundary set by Charles Spencer and enforced by Prince William. The king realized that preserving the monarchy required protecting the emotional integrity of his immediate family. He understood that pushing his son and daughter-in-law past their emotional limits would destroy the future of the institution far faster than any historical truth ever could. Queen Camilla accepted the new reality in silence. She understood the unspoken agreement that had been established inside that drawing room. Her role as queen consort would continue, but the memory of Princess Diana would remain untouched, unedited, and unblemished by palace officials. The shadow of the late Princess of Wales would continue to exist, not as a threat to the current reign, but as a permanent presence to a woman who changed the royal family forever. Earl Charles Spencer returned to Althorpe Estate late that night. He walked down the long stone corridor to the private archive room. He placed the vintage leather portfolio back into its secure vault deep within the house. The heavy steel lock clicked shut with a sharp, resonant sound. The private letters, handwritten notes, and personal journals remained safe behind thick steel doors. He had fulfilled his promise to his sister. He had protected her legacy without releasing a single page to the global media. The confrontation inside Windsor Castle marked an unforgettable turning point in modern royal history. It proved that beneath the grand titles, ancient ceremonies, and public smiles, the human heart remains the most powerful force of all. Catherine had discovered a new level of resilience through her emotional honesty. Prince William had demonstrated his absolute commitment to protecting his wife. And Earl Charles Spencer had reminded the institution that some promises are sacred, no matter how many decades have passed.